Hello and welcome to the Vagabond Way Podcast. The journey goes ever on with The Long Road. This episode, waxing lyrical. For this week's podcast chat, The Long Road discuss all things lyrics and lyricists, the do's and don'ts, the charms and the pitfalls, the exciting and the not so exciting. Steve Bonham highlights the work of a brilliant compadre of The Long Road, Paul Bunting. Kev Moore brings us further tales from his Camino travels, and the Bishop, that's me, I talk about a pudding that never was. The Vagabond Way podcast, featuring The Long Road, is exploring the world of the troubadour, the adventurer, the vagabond. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. And if those are the sorts of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We are embracing all of those things, we're celebrating all of that, and we'd love it if you joined us on the journey. Greetings, I am Chris the Bish Lydon. Welcome to another slice of life with The Long Road. Make sure you've checked out all our recent video offerings. We've got another video coming very soon, so make sure you're up to date. We've got The Rise of the Artisan, or The Long Road to Now, our mini documentary following us in search of artisan music back in the recording studio in November. We've got music videos for some of the songs we made back then as well. We've got some that are still coming, but a couple that are out there already. We've got Something's Gotta Change, and we've got Washed Away. All of these videos have been made by the brilliant Kat Hodgkinson and Gemma Caldwell, so do check them out, they are brilliant. And don't forget, if you like what we do, consider buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thelongroadband. Before I forget, we're going to have a week off from the podcast next week, so we'll be back on Friday the 21st of May with the next offering. Now on to this week's hashtag content with a slightly surreal start, but we soon fall back in line and talk some sense for a bit. I'm going to hand over to me. Greetings everybody, here we are, The Long Road are together again for another of our three-way digital chats. We've got Steve at home in Derbyshire. Hello Steve.
Bye everybody.
And I'm at home in Manchester, and Kev is at home in Spain.
In a gada da vida, bish.
Now, you may not realise this, listeners, but we do tend to do these recordings in groups. so we do a few together. So at the minute, me and Steve are on, I think we're entering our 5th hour of being on Zoom together today, because we did a couple of hours work this morning trying to get something done, and then we sort of rolled into doing this podcast chat. Kev has joined us, and now we're into our 2nd hour of podcast chat, and we have slightly lost the plot.
Yeah.
So that's why Steve was starting with a goodbye, when in fact he should have been opening with a hello.
Hello.
Hello everybody.
Hello,
Where am I? Please send help. And it's funny that the choice of words. That's where we're going to start off with today in today's chat. The words that we use, they're such an integral part of communicating, and it led me to thinking a bit more about lyrics and lyricists that we've come across that might have had a particular impact or a particular view of the world that we find, either distasteful or we really get on board with. Something about lyrics or lyricists that sparks some thought in our brains. So I'm going to hand over to Kev for the opening barrage on this. So Kev, lyrics, lyricists, what are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I adore a good lyric, and there are several that leap out to me. Often it's the worlds that these people paint, and some people are better at it than others. Probably my favourite opening line in a song is from a song called Glamour Profession by Steely Dan, and it simply starts 6:05 outside the stadium, special delivery for Hoops McCann. And that, to me, I'm in this weird place then. I'm there. What's going on? I'm asking, what's going on? And to me, that's just a brilliant setup. And the thing about Steely Dan, especially as a kid, because they're from an alien place called America, they really showed me not the similarities between Britain and America, but the huge differences in their cultural references. And it was years. The beauty of Steely Dan, discovering them as you grow up, is that you get little gifts from them as you realise things through the years. So, for example, in the song Haitian Divorce, they're singing, now we dolly back, now we fade to black. And I'm like, what the hell does what's a dolly got to do with it? And of course, it's film speak that when you're on a track, and
dolly,
you're
yes,
pulling the
yes.
camera back,
Dolly back,
and another line in one of the songs, I think from the Katie Lyde album, carrying his dinner in a paper sack, and I'm like, okay, until you realise and you start watching the cop shows and you see the alcoholics buying their booze in a brown paper bag.
Brown bag,
and
yes.
so they can drink outside in the street. All those kind of lines are just beautiful and really, really tell a story. I think in the UK, I think one of the finest sets of lyrics would be from Difford and Tilbrook, two songs, Labelled with Love and Up the Junction. Beautiful vignettes within a 3-minute song. It's so hard to do that, and they both managed to do it. She shuffles about in a candlelit hovel, like some kind of witch in blue fingers in mittens. She smells like the cat, and the neighbour she sickens. It's genius lyricism.
Yeah.
And Up the Junction, she gave birth to a daughter within a year a walker. It's just poetry. And that's the British side of it. And then I have here as a reference here, I grabbed my Ricky Lee Jones album. I'm on a bit of a Ricky Lee Jones kick at the moment because I adore her. And she's like a female Steely Dan sort of thing, She wrote this beautiful song called The Last Chance Texaco. And it's a long stretch of headlights bends into I-9, tiptoe into truck stops and sleepy D's lies. Volcanoes rumble in the taxi and glow in the dark. Camels in the driver's seat, a slow, easy mark. But you ran out of gas down the road a piece, then the battery went dead, and now the cable won't reach. It's your last chance to check under the hood. Last chance, she ain't sounding too good. Your last chance to trust the man with the star. You found the last chance Texaco. I mean, without music, it's poetry. And I just love that. It's world building. You're creating, the songwriter's creating a universe that you step in, and you enjoy the song so much more because of that.
Steve, what about you?
First of all, you've got the obvious, Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan. But, I would have, again, gone to Squeeze. I just think, I think the trick with great lyrics is they've got to be universal and intimate at the same time. And Squeeze did that so well. Like the stories of Up the Junction and things like that. They're stories, but absolutely about a time and a place and a person. But they just apply to everybody. They're wonderful lyricists. And I think there is, a great strand. I mean, they're not all lyrics, not all great lyrics are poetry. I do split them up. There are some great songs where, actually, if you look at the lyrics on the page, don't really. I mean, All Right Now by Free is a great lyric. It's hardly poetry. But when you hear it sung, it works. But then there are the very articulate ones. And if I'm not having Squeeze, I would have Ray Davies. And actually, I was watching a program on him the other day, and it was quite interesting. The guy, I think, who it was, to saying, look, if you take song by song, where comparing him with McCartney and Lennon and McCartnney, he comes out really well as a lyricist. Yeah. Songs like Days and Waterloo Sunset are just classic.
Their works are genius, I think. Yeah. They really are.
And here is a man, and I've said this before, but I'll keep saying it. Any guy who can rhyme Henley Regatta with Dying to Get At Her is all right with me, because it is just off the scale good lyric. There is something very good, about lyrics who can just put those little moments in that light it up, and it's actually one of the strengths of some country songs. There was that line in Good Year for the Roses, something along the lines of he's looking at a cup of coffee and it's got her lipstick on, and he says something like, at least she thought she wanted it, which is more than she wanted me, or something like that. Yeah. It's just really
beautiful allegory.
At least you thought you wanted it. That's so much more than I can say for me.
I love lyrics, but I would do.
I love wit in lyricism. I just recently picked up Kirsty MacColl's last album, it's very Cuban flavoured, obviously, but there's a song with the most beautiful payoff line where she's talking about being stood up by this horrendous guy, and they're in the bar watching the football, and the line is, and it's England 2, Colombia 0, and I know just how those Colombians feel. I mean, that's brilliant. You know.
Yeah.
Or there's a guy down our chip shop swears he's Elvis.
He's Elvis, yeah.
And I'm not sure about him.
Picking up on a strand from what you just said there, Steve. So Leonard Cohen, obviously one of the great songwriters of the age, and actually one of the people that he did some collaboration with, who's one of my heroes. I think I talked about this on one of the podcasts recently, actually, with Leonard Bernstein. And then so the links here. So Leonard Bernstein did a lot of stuff with, he's done Leonard Bernstein did loads of things with. He often wasn't the lyricist; he was often the composer, but did do his own lyrics sometimes. But would partner with lyricists. One of the most incredible pieces of art that's ever been created on this planet is Leonard Bernstein's Mass, which is a mix of the Roman Catholic liturgy for the Mass, so Latin words, and then he worked mainly with Stephen Schwartz, who is a Broadway musical composer, lyricist, who's done loads of things, but sort of quite populist mainstream musical stuff. And then there's one small section of this Bernstein Mass. So fundamentally, it's a Roman Catholic Mass sung nearly entirely in Latin, but with an orchestra, a rock band, a street band, an American marching band, a street chorus, which is essentially young people just shouting on the street. It's not a chorus like a classical choir sort of thing. So it's a big old mishmash of music and styles. And there's one snippet in it where the lyrics are by Paul Simon, and it's only 4 lines or 6 lines,
right? And
it's one of the best juxtapositions in Western classical music, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. You've got this brilliant, the music for the Latin bits is incredible and it's amazing. Then you get this very politically edged, searing moment from Paul Simon in the middle of it. Set to this brilliant music by Bernstein. And the first time I saw about it and heard about it, it just blew me away. The collaboration that Bernstein had with people like that, just brilliant. Little moments like that where it just, it's six lines, it's 20 words, 30 words, but it's a zinger, and I love it. And then Bernstein's most famous collaborator, perhaps, Stephen Sondheim, who's famous for music and lyrics in loads of musicals. Yeah.
And I've actually in the last few weeks, I've been listening to lots more Sondheim stuff because I think as a lyricist, he is, in the musical theatre world, he's second to none.
Yeah.
One of the things I really love about him is that he has this sort of list of pet peeves about the things that lyricists do that they shouldn't do because it's ridiculous. And one of the things that he really rallies against, which is very common, it's not so common in popular music, but it's very common in musicals, where you do this, on this website I found earlier on, it was called Yoda speak, where your sentence structure is wrong. Yeah. Where you have, you might have your verb at the end, or I can't remember the examples, but you don't say, yesterday I went to the shops. You say, yesterday to the shops I went.
Yes.
And Sondheim always rallied against, it was really common in 1930s and 40s musicals that you'd have that ridiculous sentence structure.
I think that great lyrics are clever because not only are they this poetry that we describe in the way they, the words themselves, the meaning of them captures people, but also they have a rhythmic function, and and the really great lyrics, to me, I have that almost like they're the tambourine or the snare,
a percussive, repetitive.
They're rattling across the top, and I love the lyricists who really do that and think about it. Those of you who are regular listeners to my ramblings know that I'm a bit obsessed, many would say ridiculously obsessed, with the idea of words and stories, and in particular the craft of folk songwriting as contrasted with the songwriting of musically literate composers. I think my world is more intuitive and driven by accidents and stumbling over phrases and stuff like that. I've always felt for a while that there may be a lack of folk song writers in the UK compared to, say, with the States. There's lots of singer-songwriters. They tend to write songs about how miserable they are, or how difficult life is, or their opinions on things, which are fair enough, or, well, that kind of thing. Basically, how life isn't supposed to be like this. But they rarely write songs about folk. I don't mean folk songs. I mean songs about folk, people, other people, ordinary people. The guy around the corner, the lady across the road, the man in the chip shop. In the States, people like John Prine and Guy Clark have made such people their heroes. The people whose extraordinary lives are hidden inside ordinary bodies. And in the UK, perhaps Ralph McTell, perhaps a few others, by all means write in and let me know, have seen this as the rich seam of songwriting that it can be. And then just the other day I was muttering away like this, some grumpy old man. I realised actually one of the guys I've known most of my life is exactly what I mean by a writer of songs about folk. His name's Paul Bunting. You probably won't have heard of him. It took him most of his life to release his first album last year called Half-Written Songs. But those of us who know him and love him, he's one of the great songwriters that we've ever come across. He has a rare ability to make the ordinary beautiful, and in his own idiosyncratic, charming, slightly weird way. And so I thought this week we'd celebrate a great English song about folk. It's a song of his called A Million Miles Away. Now, apologies to Paul if I get the story slightly wrong, but I believe this is about one of his relatives, perhaps an aunt, who, unlike all of us living suburban lives, was a lot wilder than that. Liked to dance, liked to drink, liked to laugh, lived life to the full. And it's about the day he went into an old care home. By now his aunt is suffering from dementia. And the matron kindly said to Paul, "Oh, she won't really understand what you're saying. She's a million miles away." And a genius songwriter like Paul took that idea and made something beautiful. A million miles away from this sad place. A million miles away from the humdrum. A million miles away from the ordinary. I love this song, and here it is.
Stuck inside a care home, clocked his past the hours. It's around his soggy breakfasts and nasty plastic flowers. Matron smiles as the visitors admire the way she's dressed. What passes off for care these days, anybody's guess. And the TV on the corner plays to itself all day, from the early morning breakfast show to the late night passion play. But sometimes on the airwaves an old dance tune comes on, and the clouds of her confusion for a little while are gone. 'Cause Lucy was once a dancer gliding a polished floor to the admiring glances of the boys stood by the door. And to every tune, every song, any old thing the band would play when the cab and the shadow faces a million miles away, dancing to impress the boys with the French cigarettes. For a little money when times were raw, alone in her room to the radio, dancing in the shadows when they'd all gone off to war. Outside the rain is pouring, puddles reflect the light, and a dusty old valve radio sings into the night. Count Basie wakes the morning up, and the band in swing time plays. They don't make 'em like they used to do in the good old days. When Lucy was a dancer, gliding a polished floor to the admiring glances of the boys stood by the door. And to every tune, every song, any old thing the band would play when the cab and the shadow faces were a million miles away. That's what they say. She's a million miles away.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Kev's Cafe Corner, or more specifically Kev's Camino Corner, as you join me on my epic walk from Santander to Santiago de Compostela in the northern Spanish province of Galicia. Last week you left me in Ribadeo, just over the border in Galicia, and I was about to spend my first of 2 nights in the albergue there. After my arduous trek from Navia on the previous day of October the 19th, I slept like a baby right through the night, waking refreshed on Tuesday, October the 20th. Clearly, I've been utterly exhausted, but there's something wonderful about falling asleep after tiring yourself to your very bones. I woke around 7:50 a.m. and got up for a very pleasant breakfast, saying my goodbyes to the French cyclists and my German friend Rebecca, who were all continuing onwards that day. I decided to explore the town, but probably involving not too much walking. I'd made that mistake back in Gijon when my enthusiasm for the sights rendered somewhat less of a rest day than I'd originally intended. I headed into the centre and found the churreria that Emile, my American cyclist friend, had recommended to me, and they were as delicious as her photo promised. As I wandered around the town after the churros, I felt my tendons tightening up and decided to head back to the albergue to be safe. I spent a strange night there, completely alone, not another soul in the building. Stories were coming out now about the few albergues that had been opened, closing behind me in the wake of the pandemic tightening its grip in Asturias. I felt like a surfer about to be overtaken by the wave in which you were riding. Wednesday, October the 21st. Wary of the latest forecast, I delayed leaving Ribadeo until around 11:30 a.m. But apart from a small shower on the outskirts of the town, I had fine weather all the way. I found a Decathlon sports goods store en route and bought a waterproof cover for my rucksack. As yet, I haven't needed it. Arriving at Barreiros, or to be more specific, around about 2.5 kilometres before it, I found my accommodation for the night. It took a while to get the lady to open up. I thought for a moment I'd have to continue on and find somewhere else for the night, but open up she did eventually, and the room was really nice. One of a row of purpose-built chalet-style rooms with ensuite bathrooms served by a communal terrace. I'd covered a relatively easy 15 kilometres this day, which felt about right as my feet were starting to ache again. You have to listen to your body on this trek. Sometimes you can really hammer it out. Other days you've just got to listen to it and take it easy. I had a shower and sat out on the terrace with a cup of tea. I felt like a god who had everything he could possibly want. I lay back and chilled for the evening as the sun went down, blissfully unaware of what tomorrow would bring. Next time, the day from hell. See you later.
This week's Bishop's Daily Bread entry is, as it turns out, it's rather more about an imagined dish than it seems than it ever was a real dish. Now, up until a few months ago, I don't know if I'd ever consciously had this dish. Maybe I had, but I can't consciously think that I had. But then one day I had this dish, and it was delicious. So I sought to recreate it. Now, that dish being a peach cobbler. Now, if you ask someone to describe what a peach cobbler is, I wouldn't be half surprised if a lot of people found it quite hard. Well, I mean, it's got to have some peaches in it, hasn't it? Hasn't it? Yes, peaches, spot on. But what's a cobbler? It was actually my niece who made this peach cobbler for me. Well, not just for me, but for the whole family. Back at Christmas when I was bubbling with my sister's household. And it was delicious. I think it might have been served with custard or perhaps cream. Can't quite remember. But it was delicious. So I asked my niece for the recipe so I could try my own at home. And the result was absolutely nothing like what I was expecting it to be or remembered it to be. I mean, was I losing it? I mean, the only thing was the same was, yes, it contained peaches. It was a very odd recipe, which started with a thick layer of melted butter in the bottom of the oven dish, and then a sort of sweet cinnamony batter on top of that, and then halved peaches laid on top of that. Hang on, was I making some sort of peach in the hole, a toad in the hole, but with peaches, a pudding? Anyway, baked it, and whilst the flavours were fine, peaches sort of underwhelming, actually. The cinnamony batter, pleasingly, not overwhelming. There's always a risk with cinnamon. The textures were odd. The batter had formed a sort of cake, sort of Yorkshire pudding, sort of pancake around the peaches, and covered them over. In some places, around the edges, the batter had caramelised so much as to be sort of very caramelly. Overall, it was just very odd. And I'm sure I was expecting something a little bit more... Yeah, see, I can't even put my finger on the word to describe what I was expecting. To me, a cobbler would be a bit more, I don't know, sort of scone dumplingy. almost with like a sort of almost crisp outer shell, but a soft, scony inside. Crisp like bread crisp, not crisp like, I don't know what crisp like. Anyway, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe a cobbler isn't what I thought it was. Maybe the version we had at Christmas time, maybe that was just a dream or a happy accident, and my niece created something unrecreatable. And so often with my food adventures, they're out seeking a moment in time from the past, e.g. My never-ending quest for the perfect primary school chocolate concrete with pink custard, yet to be achieved. And sometimes you get close, but it's not quite. And sometimes, as with my peach cobbler this week, you get absolutely nowhere near. But the journey's still fun. And perhaps, just perhaps, peach in the hole will catch on. It does make me wonder, though, why toad in the hole is called that. What's the toad bit? I can feel an investigation coming on here. So that's it for this week. Thank you for listening wherever in the world you are. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and now YouTube as well. The next episode will be out in 2 weeks' time. Join us on YouTube for the Transatlantic Connection show and become part of the Transatlantic Connection movement. Head to youtube.com/thelongroadband. If you fancy buying us a coffee, you now can at buymeacoffee.com/thelongroadband. It's dead simple to just drop us a few quid to support what we do. It even accepts Apple Pay and Google Pay. Super easy. All of our music and merch is on Bandcamp, where you can help support a positive ecosystem for the music industry. Downloads, streaming, vinyls, CDs, the companion book, it's all there. thelongroadband.bandcamp.com. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/thevagabondway. Big thank you to our Patreons and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Stuart Lydon, Yvette Lydon and Trish Taylor. Thank you for your ongoing support. If you'd like to support us, become a Vagabonder. You'll get free digital stuff and merchandise in the post if you want it. Help us create something different, something that entertains and something that inspires others. So join us on the journey and release the vagabond within. Patreon.com/thevagabondway. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers, for joining us on The Vagabond Way. Remember, the world isn't beige. It's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with The Long Road. Bye for now.